back to where we finished off on the outline, or the introduction outline, okay? So you guys should have ended with, remember we started with the hook, right? We moved on to, you have to express what the theme of your story is, okay? Then you have to make sure I understand how the theme relates to your story. So that's the introduction, right? Then you move on to the beginning of the story. You need an introduction of the setting, okay? Remember, introduce the setting. It should just be, it was, you know, whatever your setting is. It was Michigan in 1932, right? It should be instead, show me the setting, right? And you could still say the word Michigan somewhere in there, right? Because you don't necessarily know exactly how to show me Michigan, but show me where we are, alright? And then let me know what year it is. Day 12 here. Right, where I was, my story was set in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and I demonstrated that by demonstrating it was snowy, so you know it's winter time. And then I mentioned it was Kenosha, and then remember I showed the time period by describing a car on the street, saying it was a new 1936 car. So you knew it was the year 1936, okay? Then introduce the conflict, remember, alright, this is where you introduce the main point of your story, okay? Remember, it could be, a lot of you are writing stories about like immigrants who came to this country and had trouble finding a job, okay? So introduce that conflict. He or she was new to the country. They had been having trouble finding a long-term position or a long-term job, okay? Introduce the main characters, okay? Remember, just say, hey, my main characters are Sally, John, and whatever, right? Introduce them in the way that's organic to the story, okay? Now remember, probably already by this point you've already probably introduced your main character, right? In this section, if you've already done that, just describe them a little bit, or he or she or they, right? Just describe them a little bit, okay? Let me know what they look like, okay? Give me a little hint, okay? And then finally, the event onset. Remember, the event onset is just the beginning of your main story, the beginning of your conflict, okay? Does anybody have any questions, all right? I just want to do a quick overview of that. No? Okay. Now we're going to move on to our second part. This one is very blank because there's a lot of freedom in this section, okay? But next thing you're going to move on to is the middle of your story, okay? The middle of your story is just you're going to start off with just the narrative continuation. So what that means is you've already started with your event onset, you've already set your story in motion, okay? Now you're going to just start naming what happened. Now you're just going to start telling the story of what happened next in chronological order, okay? So that's all this section is. It's just the continuation of the story in chronological order. Chronological order meaning the order that things happen with in terms of like time, right? So if your story was about somebody an immigrant trying to find a job, the beginning of the story is that they're trying to find a job. The story would probably continue with his applying to places, he was getting rejected, right? That's installed in chronological order, right? I want to point out the story middle is, I put there about 2 to 4 paragraphs. Could be longer than 2 to 4 paragraphs. Remember, you have to break a paragraph with each dialogue, right? People are talking back and forth. Remember, I demonstrated that on Friday. If dialogue. Remember, if somebody's responding, right, if somebody's saying hello, somebody's responding hello, those are 2 separate paragraphs, okay? Obviously, they're very short.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I mean. But again, I would say in general, if you have less than 2 paragraphs of your story middle, you're probably doing it wrong, okay? So that's why I put 2 to 4 paragraphs. And if you're way over 4 paragraphs, you're probably doing it wrong. When I'm putting 2 to 4 paragraphs, I basically mean major text, okay? So you do your narrative continuation, okay? Does anybody have any questions about the narrative continuation or paragraph anything, how they're supposed to arrange their paragraphs?
Oh my gosh.
students have questions, but they're not asking me in class for some reason. If you have a question, ask me now, and that way I don't have to keep answering people. I just answer it once for the class. Okay. So, by the way, this is posted on your Google Classroom. I forgot to say that. So it's the most recent thing, I think. Yeah. So nonfiction, narrative, outline, your body, paragraphs. Okay. Then the last part of the only specific part you need in your narrative, in your story middle, is the climax of your story. Okay. The climax is like the height of your story. Okay. So if you imagine your story like an arc, right? Try my best way to describe this. So, yeah, if you imagine your story like an arc or a hill, right? The climax is at the very top, right? So there's rising action, right, to get to the climax, right? So in the case of what I was talking about earlier, if your story's about an immigrant who's trying to find a job in America, immigrated to America and trying to find a job in America, it would be, maybe you would go the into action, the sorry, how did I phrase that again? Sorry, my mind's event onset. My mind's all over the place right now. The event onset would be the bottom of the hill, then you climb up to narrative continuation, right? So, event onset, he immigrates to America, he tries to find a job, he can't find anything. Maybe your narrative climax is he finally gets there, okay? Right? And then he gets a call back. Actually, I'm not going to talk about that right now. We'll talk about that tomorrow. That's on the down slope of your oh my god, I need to stop doing that. Of your story, right? That's your story end, which we'll discuss tomorrow. Okay. So the climax is sort of the height of your story, right? I have an easier way to do this. I'm going to show you guys an example. I stopped doing my example mostly because I was like, I don't have time to write a full essay of my own to give you guys an example, right? Which is kind of what I was doing. So I pulled up the student example which we looked at a couple weeks ago, right? Of a nonfiction narrative. So here it is, example of a nonfiction narrative. And this is still in Google Classroom, so if you ever want to access this, feel free. You also don't need to turn this in. A couple people did. I don't know why. All it is an example. It's not a real point. So, if you look at the story, right, this is the Remarkable story. If you guys remember, it's the story where the guy invented a ball that helped him communicate with his dog. Okay? So if we read through, his into is right here, and that's how the Remarkable was born, right? In his introduction, he talked about how he was having trouble communicating with his dog. He wanted to communicate with his dog better. So his into, at the beginning of the story is he comes up with the idea, or he has the initial idea for the Remarkable, right? And that's how the Remarkable was born. Okay? Then he presents events in sequential order, right? He talks about how Barnaby had a squeaky toy, it made Barnaby howl. It always seemed to Eddie that through his process, Barnaby was almost communicating. Remember, Eddie is the owner, Barnaby's the dog, okay? This is where he invents the toy, right? He's going to bridge the gap between species. He does it off his old chemistry set. Through trial and error, he eventually increased the toy's flexibility, resilience, and mouthfeel to make it easier for him to communicate. Alright, then he continues on by describing how Barnaby reacts to the prototype, how he begins complaining all the time about different things, alright? He begins complaining about, he uses the ball to complain about a bunch of different stuff, okay? And then finally, our climax is right here, okay? So, Barnaby made increasingly specific demands such as wake me in 10 minutes and I want filtered water, okay? He's still talking about the demands he's making. This kind of conversation did not bring them closer as Eddie had thought, but instead it drove them apart, okay? So the climax of our story in this one is, okay, the climax in our story, in this story, Eddie realizes that the ball, him being able to communicate with his dog Barnaby, is actually a negative thing, not a positive thing, okay? So that's where our climax is in this story, okay? You can see we build, he has the idea for the ball, or he talks about in the introduction, or the beginning of the story is he has the idea for the ball, he invents the ball, okay? Barnaby starts using the ball to complain. Climax is boom, right there. Eddie realizes that it's a negative thing. Him being able to communicate more with Barnaby is a negative thing. And then, as we get into the story ending, you'll see on the back half how he gets more and more annoyed until he finally hides the ball. Okay? But we'll discuss that more probably tomorrow. Or maybe Thursday. Either way. Okay? I think probably Thursday. So I want to give you guys as much time to work on this. Does anybody have any questions on that? Please ask me now. I'm begging you. Hopefully you all are paying attention. Okay. Okay, I can only do so much if you don't ask me questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and assume you are all 100% on board. You know what you're doing. Okay. Yeah, so... Hello? Hello? Can people hear me? Is there anybody else having issues hearing me? My Wi-Fi seems to be fine, so... Okay. Alright. Is anybody else having issues hearing me other than Marcos? I'm trying to speak into my mouth. Keep my mic as close to my mouth as possible. Okay, perfect. No? Okay, good. Alright. Yeah, I'm trying to keep my mic as close to my mouth as possible so that I'm as clear as possible. Okay. Okay. Alright, yeah, I think that's probably an issue on your end, Marcos, if nobody else is having issues, so... do you understand, Marcos? Do I need to re-explain anything, or are you okay? Okay, perfect. Okay, that is what I have for you guys in terms of us just talking. So what you guys are going to do, our live time's an hour today, right, as normal, so we have until 11 o'clock. We started at 10, so we have until 11. So for the next 20, so for about the next 20 minutes, because it's 10:30, it's about 10:35. What I want you guys to do is, if you haven't finished your narrative outline for your introduction, finish that, okay? It's worth a lot of points. If you got a 0 on it, your grade probably suffered. It definitely suffered, okay? And you probably got a 0 on it because you haven't turned it in. So finish it if you haven't finished this already. Remember, try and fill in each space with complete sentences. Try and fill in each one as you would write it in the actual story itself, okay? That's the best way to do this, okay? If you do it correctly, when it comes to writing the essay next week, you won't have to write it all, basically. All you have to do is copy and paste from your outlines and then just reformat to make sure the formats are correct, okay? And I think what I'm going to do, since not everybody was here on Friday, I'm going to post in the group chat. I'll post like a place to turn in your essay, and I'll probably post just an already formatted version for you guys so that you guys know where to type everything, okay? It'll just be easier then. Well, no, because some of you have already started typing it out if you were here on Friday. I'll just post it, you know what, I'll just post instructions in the Google Classroom, okay? If you guys are already finished with the outline, the introduction outline, or when you do finish, you guys should start working on this, alright? Remember, just right here, you're just listing more events, the events as they happen in chronological order until you get up to your climax, okay? And the climax goes there, alright? And that's just the middle of your story. Okay? So that's what you're working on for the next 20 minutes. At about 10:55, I'll stop you because I want to go over, you guys have more independent reading today and questions you have to answer about the independent reading, so I want to go over those, especially the questions because they're a little bit different today. So I don't want to